All right, let's dive right into this explainer and shatter a huge misconception right out of the gate. When you're standing in a gallery staring at a gorgeous masterpiece, you probably think you're looking at a static, frozen image, right? Well, chemically speaking, no way. You are actually watching a vibrant, ongoing chemical action movie. Today, we're exploring the secret life of art, breaking down the intense, postgraduate level chemistry happening inside our most beloved paints and pigments. Our core thesis today is actually pretty mind-bending. A painting is not merely a static object. It's actually a thin, solid-state chemistry experiment applied to a surface. And the crazy part? It just keeps reacting for decades or even centuries. So every single time you look at a painting, you're observing a chemical reaction that is literally still in progress. Section 1. The slow chemical reaction. To really understand how these reactions work, we've got to look past the canvas. Every type of paint essentially has three functional layers: the substrate, which is just what you're painting on, the pigment, which gives us the actual color, and, absolutely crucially, the binder that holds the whole shebang together. Take classic egg tempera, for example. The egg yolk itself is this brilliant natural oil and water emulsion. It's roughly 50% water, 33% lipids, and 16% protein. When an artist strokes it onto a surface, the water evaporates in just minutes, right? Then the proteins denature and cross-link into this incredibly tight, insoluble matrix. It's a spontaneous chemical transformation happening right there on the brush. Section 2. Watercolor's Rewettable Magic. Let's switch gears and see how a totally different medium behaves. Watercolor relies on gum arabic as its binder, which is a really complex, highly branched sugar derived from acacia trees. The key takeaway here is that, unlike egg tempera, watercolor solidifies entirely through physical drying. As the water evaporates, the gum arabic forms hydrogen bonds with the cellulose fibers of the paper. There is absolutely no chemical cross-linking happening. And because it relies strictly on physical drying, watercolor is intrinsically rewettable forever. You could literally add a drop of water centuries later, and it will redissolve that film so you can lift color and make corrections. And because it's driven by purely physical properties, watercolor allows natural forces to act as co-artists right on the paper. It's fascinating. For instance, gravity will pull dense pigments like ultramarine down into the microscopic valleys of the paper, creating this beautiful textured effect we call granulation. Or, if you're painting with hard water, the calcium and magnesium can actually collapse the electrical charge around the pigment particles. That makes them visibly clump together in a process called flocculation. You can also get blooms, which happen when fresh water flows into a drying wash, and capillary action pushes the pigment to the edges, leaving behind those dark, branched rings. But what if we want to take that gorgeous, transparent watercolor and make it completely opaque? Well, then we create gouache. Gouache uses the exact same gum arabic binder, but it relies on a physics principle known as Mie scattering. By using larger pigment particles, specifically dialing in a diameter roughly half the wavelength of visible light, which is about 0.2 to zero point 0.4 micrometers, and adding chalk extenders, gouache physically blocks and scatters the light before it ever reaches the paper. That is exactly what gives it that highly prized flat matte opacity. Section 3. Oil Paint's Endless Cure. Okay, getting into the heavy-duty chemistry of oil paint reveals a really surprising truth. It doesn't actually dry at all. I know, it sounds weird, but there's no water evaporating here. Instead, it cures through a hardcore chemical process called auto-oxidative free radical chain polymerization. It relies on a drying binder, usually linseed oil, which is absolutely packed with the specific fatty acids needed to make this reaction happen. Now, I know that sounds like a massive wall of academic jargon, so let's just break it down into 3 simple steps. First, initiation. Oxygen from the air literally enters the paint and becomes an active chemical ingredient, creating highly reactive free radicals. Next is propagation, where these radicals kick off a massive chain reaction. And finally, cross-linking. The molecules essentially weave themselves together to form permanent new carbon and oxygen bonds. It's like it's weaving a microscopic, durable plastic net across the entire canvas. And this curing timeline totally proves why an oil painting is truly never finished. Within just hours, the paint hits its gel point and loses fluidity. But the full curing process? That takes months to years. In fact, the cross-linking and double bond migration keeps happening for decades. This constant chemical shifting is exactly why older oil paintings turn yellow. Oh, and it's also responsible for that classic oil paint smell you get in art studios. That smell is actually the scent of volatile aldehydes slowly, continuously escaping as the paint cures over the years. Section 4. Fresco and acrylic. Believe it or not, the incredibly delicate process of creating a traditional fresco actually begins in a literal raging inferno. You have to heat limestone to a staggering 900 degrees Celsius just to calcinite it and create quicklime. Once you slake that quicklime with water and apply it to a wall as a wet plaster, the real magic kicks in. You paint your pigment directly into this wet plaster, and as it sits there, the wall literally breathes in carbon dioxide from the surrounding atmosphere. This triggers carbonation, growing microscopic calcite crystals that physically trap and encapsulate the pigment particles inside solid stone. There is zero organic binder used here. It's a totally permanent inorganic matrix, which is exactly why the frescoes in Pompeii have survived perfectly for millennia. But because fresco is a live, ongoing chemical reaction with the air, artists are constantly racing the clock. You've only got about an 8 to 12-hour working window before that wet wall turns completely into solid stone. That is just a fraction of the time you get with oils, which give you hundreds of hours. But hey, it's still significantly longer than our next, much more modern medium, acrylics. Contrast that ancient stone-growing fresco method with modern acrylic paint. Acrylic is simply an aqueous dispersion of polymers. To put it simply, it's just microscopic plastic spheres floating around in water. As that water evaporates, those little plastic particles pack tightly together, deform, and interdiffuse in a process called latex coalescence. They literally squish together to form an irreversible, continuous plastic film. And once they've coalesced, unlike watercolor, they're never redissolving in water again. Section 5. The molecules of color. For our final stop in this explainer, we're going to zoom in way past the binders and the drying methods and look directly at the chromophores. These are the chemical origins of the colors themselves. When we look at a greatest hits of historical pigments, we see that these breathtaking colors come with some pretty wild and honestly often dangerous chemical quirks. Take lead white, for example. It creates this unbelievably gorgeous, opaque white due to its high refractive index. But it is highly toxic, and over time it saponifies, which basically means it turns into soap when mixed with oil. Then you have vermilion red, which relies on a 2.0 electron-volt band gap. Stunning color, but it's made of toxic mercury and physically turns black if exposed to UV light. And we can't forget the legendary ultramarine blue. Its color literally comes from an S3 radical anion trapped inside an aluminosilicate cage. Historically, this stuff was pricier than actual gold. Yet, if it even touches acid, the chemical cage breaks down entirely and the beautiful color is just destroyed. Because all of these pigments and binders are continuously reacting, oxidizing, degrading, and shifting over the centuries, the art of restoring them is intensely complex. The source material sums it up perfectly, stating, "Conservation chemistry is applied paint chemistry in reverse. Art conservators are essentially high-stakes forensic scientists. They have to reverse engineer these incredibly complex molecular mechanisms just to try and halt time." So, let's bring this all back to you. The next time you're wandering through a museum, or even just glancing at a framed print hanging in your own living room, I want you to stop and ask yourself, what invisible, slow-motion chemical reactions are unfolding right before my eyes at this very second? Because art isn't just a static record of the past. It is a living, breathing, chemical process. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep looking closely.